Jessa Parker didn't even look up when the man sat down next to her in the crowded orthopedic waiting room. She was too busy highlighting rows of data on a legal pad balanced on her knee and muttering about a supplier who hadn't delivered the materials her client needed by Monday. "Excuse me," the man said, glancing sideways at her. "Do you always talk to yourself when you're mad, or should I be worried?" She finally looked up, startled to realize someone was actually speaking to her. The man next to her had a chiseled jaw, dark hair that looked too perfect to be accidental, and a navy cashmere coat thrown over an obviously expensive charcoal suit. He looked wildly out of place in the cramped waiting room with scuffed linoleum floors and a broken vending machine blinking out of order in the corner. "Should I be worried that you're eavesdropping?" she shot back, arching an eyebrow. His mouth twitched, amused. "You were muttering like a lunatic. I figured danger might be involved." Jessa rolled her eyes and went back to her notes. "Well, I'm not dangerous. Just busy. And irritated. Bad day. Bad week," she said without looking up. "I run a design firm. My assistant quit. My supplier ghosted me. And now my client's threatening to pull out unless I pull off a miracle." He paused. "And your ankle?" She blinked. "What?" He nodded at the ice pack balancing on her foot. "You're here for the ankle, right?" "Oh, yeah, that too. I tripped over a crate of tile samples in my studio. I think I twisted it." She sighed. "Honestly, I don't even have time for this. Maybe the universe is forcing you to slow down." She gave him a look. "Are you always this philosophical in waiting rooms?" "Only when I'm sitting next to someone interesting." That got her attention. She looked at him again, properly this time. He looked like someone who spent more time in boardrooms than doctors' offices. Confident. Composed. Definitely not some random guy with a sprained wrist. "I'm Jessa," she said cautiously. "Preston," he replied. "Nice to meet you, Jessa." She hesitated. "Preston." He grinned. "Just Preston." Before she could press further, the nurse called out his name. "Mr. Langston?" He stood, buttoning his coat. "Looks like that's me." Langston. That name was familiar. She frowned, watching him walk toward the hallway. Where had she heard it before? Then it hit her. Langston Holdings. One of the biggest real estate investment firms in the country. Forbes had done a profile on its elusive CEO a few months ago. Billionaire. Reclusive. Avoided interviews. Always wore navy. No way. But as he glanced back over his shoulder and met her gaze with a small nod, her stomach flipped. That was definitely him. The next morning, she limped into her studio with a brace on her ankle and 3 missed calls from her contractor. "Fantastic," she muttered, tossing her bag onto her desk. She barely had time to sit before her intern, Molly, poked her head in. "Jessa? There's a guy asking for you out front. Says his name is Preston." "What?" Her heart kicked. She hobbled out into the lobby and there he was. Preston Langston. In a leather jacket this time, looking impossibly relaxed as he leaned against the reception desk holding a coffee carrier. "Thought you could use caffeine and company," he said, holding out a cup. She stared at him. "How did you know where I work?" "You mentioned running a design firm. There's only one Parker Design and Renovation in this city. I Googled. Stalker. Persistent," he corrected with a grin. "Also, you left your pen in the waiting room. Figured I'd return it." She eyed him. "You came all the way here to return a pen? And maybe to ask if you'd have lunch with me?" Her mouth opened, then closed. "I don't date," she said finally, folding her arms. "That wasn't a no. I'm not interested." "Still not a no." She fought a smile. "You're annoying. I've been told." She hesitated, then took the coffee. "Fine. Lunch. But if you turn out to be a weirdo, I'm limping away from you as fast as I can." He laughed. "Deal." Lunch turned into dinner. Dinner turned into her laughing so hard over dessert she snorted. And by the time he walked her to her car, her stomach was flipping again, this time, not from nerves. "I had fun," she said, surprised to hear herself admit it. "Me too." He leaned against her car, watching her. "You're not what I expected. Because I run my own company and don't have time for distractions?" "Because you're real," he said simply. "You're grounded. Authentic. Everyone in my world is always trying to impress or get something. You didn't even recognize me at first. She paused. I did eventually. And you still didn't change how you talk to me. I like that. Jessa looked up at him. So what happens now? Are you going to disappear into your billionaire tower and forget the woman who yelled at you in a waiting room? He stepped closer. Not a chance. And then, without asking, he kissed her. It wasn't slow. It wasn't careful. It was impulsive and warm and made her forget the pain in her ankle, the stress in her body, and every reason she told herself not to fall for anyone. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers. Tell me you felt that. She swallowed. I felt it. He grinned. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. 2 days later, she was in her studio when a delivery truck pulled up and 2 men wheeled in 3 massive crates. What is all this? She asked, stunned. One of the men handed her a note. Since your supplier flaked, thought you could use a little backup. Preston. Inside the crates? Imported marble tile? The exact kind she'd been trying to get her hands on for weeks. She stared at the slabs, speechless. Molly peeked over her shoulder. So, is that the guy from the waiting room? Jessa nodded slowly. Yeah, that's him. And for the first time in a long time, her heart felt open. Like maybe falling in love wasn't such a terrible idea after all. Jessa balanced a measuring tape in one hand and a light fixture in the other, standing on a ladder that wobbled just enough to make her regret not waiting for the contractor. The showroom renovation was behind schedule and the grand opening was less than 3 weeks away. She hadn't heard from Preston in 2 days, not that she was keeping track, of course. Careful, came a voice from below. She looked down, startled to see him holding the base of the ladder. He wore dark jeans and a tailored black shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His hair was windswept, like he'd come straight from somewhere important and hadn't stopped moving since. You have a habit of showing up unannounced, she said, climbing down. You have a habit of climbing ladders when you shouldn't. She stepped off, brushing dust from her hands. I'm perfectly capable. He tilted his head toward the fixture. You installed that at the wrong angle. I what? She turned, squinting. You're off by 2 degrees. It'll drive you crazy every time you see it. Are you always this exact? He met her eyes. Only when it matters. Jessa turned away, pretending to check her clipboard. Her heart was racing again, and she hated that he could throw her off balance with a single sentence. So, she said, trying to sound neutral, did you come to critique my lighting or? Actually, he said, walking deeper into the space, I wanted to see where the magic happens. This isn't magic. It's stress, caffeine, and a lot of begging people to show up on time. He ran a hand along the edge of a custom shelving unit. You built all of this? She nodded. Every design, every detail. It's my baby. He turned to her. Then you're brilliant. And relentless. She crossed her arms. Flattery doesn't work on me. I'm not trying to flatter you. I'm trying to understand you. Jessa raised an eyebrow. Why? Because I can't stop thinking about you. The words landed heavily between them. She stepped back, caught off guard by the honesty in his tone. I don't know what this is, she said slowly. Or what we're doing. I don't either, he admitted. But I know I want more of it. She looked down at her boots. I don't have time for whatever this is. My focus has to be here. On this launch. On surviving the next few weeks. I'm not asking you to stop, he said. I'm asking if I can stand beside you while you do it. Jessa stared at him. Why? Because you're the first person in a long time who's made me feel like I'm not just a name on a building. She was quiet for a long moment. I don't need saving, Preston. I know. That's probably why I can't stay away. She looked up at him, her mouth half open, but before she could respond, Molly burst in from the back office. Jessa, the flooring for the main entry just got delivered. And it's the wrong color. Again. She groaned. Seriously. Preston moved toward the door. Come on. Let's go fix it. She blinked. You don't even know what it's supposed to look like. No, but I know how to talk to people who don't listen. That's half my job. He didn't wait for permission, just held the door open with an expectant look. Jessa followed, unsure whether she was more surprised that he was still here or that she wanted him to be. The delivery driver was arguing with one of the subcontractors when they arrived, and Jessa immediately stepped in. "This is supposed to be antique ash, not maple. We sent the specs twice." The man shrugged. "This is what was on the truck." "I don't care what was on the truck," she said, fighting to keep her voice calm. "I need what I ordered." Preston stepped forward, pulling his phone from his coat pocket. "What company sent this?" "Northline Supply," the man replied, annoyed. Preston made a quick call, his voice low and composed. A few seconds later, he handed the phone to the driver. "Your supervisor wants a word." The driver went pale and took the call. After a brief, panicked exchange, he handed the phone back and mumbled, "We'll have the correct shipment here by tomorrow morning." Jessa turned to Preston, stunned. "What did you say?" "I have a few contacts," he said simply. "That wasn't a contact. That was a miracle." He looked at her. "You needed help. I helped. I didn't ask you to. You didn't have to." Her breath caught. She wasn't used to this. People didn't swoop in and fix things for her. She fixed things for everyone else. "I don't want to owe you," she said quietly. "You don't," he replied. "But you could let me stay." Jessa studied him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I don't think I've ever met a woman who would rather install light fixtures than go to dinner. And that makes you more interesting than any gala or board meeting I've ever sat through." She laughed, despite herself. "That's a low bar." "No," he said, stepping closer. "It's a new one, and you set it." That night, she stayed late at the studio, reviewing the updated floor plans. Around 9, the door opened again, and Preston walked in holding a takeout bag and 2 sodas. "You didn't eat, did you?" he asked. "No," she admitted. "I forgot. Then I'm just in time." She cleared space on the drafting table and they ate side by side, surrounded by blueprints and paint swatches. "Do you miss normal?" she asked between bites. "Like before everything you touched turned into a headline?" He leaned back in the chair. "I don't remember what normal felt like. But this feels close." Jessa set her fork down. "I'm not the kind of person you date." Preston met her gaze. "Good. Because I'm not looking for someone I've dated before." She hesitated. "What happens when this ends?" "Why does it have to?" "Because people like you don't stay in places like this." He reached across the table, his hand warm over hers. "Maybe I've been in the wrong places." And for once, she didn't have a comeback. By the time Jessa stepped into the Langston penthouse for the first time, she had already told herself 5 times not to be impressed. It didn't help. The elevator opened directly into the living space, no hallway, no foyer, just an expanse of glass and steel and soft lighting that overlooked the skyline like the city itself had bowed in deference to him. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire room, and the distant hum of traffic below was swallowed by thick silence and engineered calm. "This is where you live?" she asked, turning in place. "It's one of them," Preston said, hanging his coat on a minimalist hook by the wall. "Of course it is." He didn't offer a tour. He didn't need to. The space spoke for itself: sleek lines, imported finishes, and a grand piano that hadn't been touched in years but still gleamed like it had been tuned that morning. "I wasn't trying to impress you," he added. "Then you failed spectacularly," she muttered, walking toward the windows. "This view is ridiculous. I thought you might like it. You see things differently than most people. I see things in inches and light angles. I don't know how to exist in a place like this." "Then we'll figure it out together." She turned, folding her arms. "Why me?" "I ask myself that every time I see you." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one that feels true," he said, stepping closer. "You don't need anything from me. You don't bend. You don't flatter. You challenge." She studied him. "Do you want to be challenged?" "I want someone who sees me without the layers." Jessa looked away. "I don't know how to do this." "You're already doing it." He didn't push. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, giving her space while also anchoring her in place with nothing but presence. "I have a meeting with an investor tomorrow," she said quietly. "If it goes well, I'll be able to take on bigger projects. Maybe even hire a full team. You want me to pull some strings?" "No. I want to do this on my own." "Then I'll be in the back row, clapping quietly." She laughed under her breath. You don't do anything quietly. Have dinner with me here. No restaurants. No photographers. Just you and me. She hesitated, then nodded once. He moved to the kitchen, which looked like it had been designed for a 5-star chef but hadn't been used for anything more ambitious than bottled water. Still, he opened a lower cabinet and pulled out a cast-iron skillet. You cook? She asked, eyebrows raised. I used to, before everything got too big. He prepped ingredients with precision, and she watched from a stool at the island, still trying to wrap her head around the fact that the same man who'd been on the cover of Fortune was now chopping shallots in rolled-up sleeves. As the scent of garlic and butter filled the space, she leaned back. Did your family always have money? He paused, wiped his hands, and leaned on the counter. My father built the company from a construction trailer. We didn't have anything when I was a kid. He died when I was 22. I inherited everything. And you've been running ever since? Trying to prove I deserve it, he admitted. Which is exhausting. Her voice softened. You do deserve it. He looked at her, something behind his eyes flickering. You're the first person who's said that without a motive. Dinner was simple pan-seared steak, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread from a local bakery. They ate at the long dining table near the windows, the city lights flickering like distant stars. Halfway through, he set his fork down. I don't want to be careful with you. She glanced up. Meaning, everything in my life is calculated. Every move is strategic. But with you, I don't want to plan. I just want to be. I'm not looking for a fantasy, Preston. Neither am I. I've lived in one long enough to know it's empty. She reached for her wine glass. I don't know what this is yet. Then let's find out together. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. After dinner, he walked her to the door, but neither of them moved to open it. I have to be up early, she said. I know. She lingered, then stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't a question. It wasn't tentative. It was an answer to every unspoken thing between them. When she pulled back, she met his gaze. Don't disappear. I wasn't planning on it. The elevator doors closed behind her, and he stood there for a long time, staring at the space she had just left. The next morning, Jessa arrived at her investor meeting early. The building was sleek, but the conference room was all cold glass and too bright lighting. She wore a tailored cream blazer, heels that still hurt her ankle, and carried a portfolio containing months of sleepless nights and spreadsheets. The investor, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an impeccable reputation, flipped through her presentation in silence. You're asking for a lot, she said finally. I'm offering more. I've doubled revenue year over year, and I've done it alone. With a team, I could triple it. The woman set the folder down. You've had offers before. Why now? Because I finally believe I can scale without losing what makes it mine. A long pause, then a nod. I think we can work together. Jessa held her breath until after she left the building. Outside, the sun was too bright, and her phone buzzed with a call she didn't recognize. She answered anyway. Did you get it? Preston's voice came through, low and certain. How did you? I didn't interfere. I just waited. A smile tugged at her lips. I got it. Then tonight we celebrate. I have drywall samples to review. Then I'll bring champagne to the studio. There was a pause. Preston, she said, her voice quiet but steady. I'm starting to believe you might be real. I'm not, he said. But I'm yours anyway. The first snow of the season fell the morning Jessa officially signed the partnership agreement. The ink was barely dry when she stepped out of the notary's office, snowflakes catching in her lashes and melting on her cheeks. Her phone rang as she crossed the street, and she answered without looking. Tell me you're free tonight, Preston said. Barely, she said, dodging a delivery cyclist. But I can be. I've got something I need to show you. Is it another skyline? No. This one's a little more grounded. By the time she arrived at the address he texted her, evening had fallen and the streetlights glowed amber against the thickening snow. The building was tucked between a row of older storefronts, weathered brick, iron-framed windows, and an understated plaque beside the door that read 245. Preston stood waiting just inside the entrance, hands in his coat pockets. "You're late," he said, eyes brighter than the street behind her. "You're lucky I came at all. I had to bribe my contractor with pastries just to finish on time." He stepped aside, holding the door open. "Worth it." She stepped into the space, expecting another penthouse or luxury suite. What she found instead was a raw, open room, exposed beams, original hardwood floors, and the scent of sawdust still clinging to the air. The walls were half-painted in soft gray tones, and a row of pendant lights hung from the ceiling, still in their packaging. "I bought this 3 years ago," Preston said, walking beside her. "It was supposed to be a new headquarters, but I could never figure out what to do with it." She turned slowly. "It's beautiful. It's yours." She stopped. "What?" "I had it rezoned last week. It's now approved for mixed-use design. Showroom on the first floor, studio upstairs, whatever you need." Her breath caught. "You bought me a building?" "No," he said simply. "I'm giving you one." She stared at him. "Preston, that's not a gift. That's an entire life. You gave me mine back. This is just me returning the favor." She walked forward, hands trailing along the unfinished walls. "Is this really happening? I knew the moment I met you that you were going to change everything. You didn't even know my name. I didn't need to." She turned back to him, voice low. "Why me?" "Because I've built towers that scrape the clouds, and none of them ever made me feel like you do when you look at me like I'm just a man." "You are just a man." "Not to me," he said. "To me, you're the only thing that's ever made sense." Jessa pressed her fingers to her lips, emotions knotting in her throat. It wasn't about the building. It wasn't about the gesture. It was the way he stood there defenseless in a way she hadn't seen before. Not untouchable. Not composed. Just real. She crossed the space between them and took his hand. "I've spent so long building something I thought would protect me. And then you walked in and offered me foundation instead." He tilted his head. "So what do we build first?" "Something that lasts." They spent the rest of the evening walking through the space, room by room, making plans. Not just for walls and fixtures, but for everything that came after: collaborations, travel, maybe even time off. She laughed when he suggested putting her desk by one of the big front windows so she could judge people's outfits as they walked by. He grinned when she said she wanted a coffee station that didn't use pods because real coffee doesn't come in plastic. It was late when he drove her back to her apartment, the snow now a thick blanket over the streets. He didn't get out this time. He just parked and turned to her as the engine idled softly. "You know I didn't plan for any of this," he said. She nodded. "Neither did I. But I want it. All of it. The chaos. The late nights. You falling asleep on blueprints. Me trying to cook and probably burning things. I want to build a life with you, Jessa." She didn't answer immediately. She reached into her bag, pulled out the pen he'd returned to her that first day, and held it up. "I've been carrying this around like a superstition." He took it gently. "I thought I was the one who couldn't let go. I guess we're both terrible at pretending things don't matter." She leaned in, and this time when they kissed, there wasn't hesitation or surprise. It was steady, sure, and filled with the promise of everything they hadn't said yet. 3 months later, the new Parker Design showroom opened to a guest list that included industry leaders, press, and a few faces from Preston's world who were clearly shocked when they realized who he was here for. Jessa wore a structured black jumpsuit and walked the space with the ease of someone who had finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. Preston stayed in the background, letting her shine, but when she caught his eye from across the room and smiled, it was like the whole world narrowed down to just that moment. After the last guests left, she found him in the back office, leaning against the doorway. "You stayed quiet tonight," she said. "You were busy running the show. I always imagined this would feel like a finish line. And it feels like the beginning." He stepped closer, reaching into his jacket pocket. Her breath caught when he pulled out a small velvet box. "Before you say anything," he said, "this isn't about timing or expectations. It's just me asking the woman who changed my life if she'll let me spend the rest of it making sure she never has to handle everything alone again." She opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, and nothing like the flashy jewelry she saw on socialites. It was perfect. "You know I don't believe in perfect," she whispered. "I don't either. I believe in you." She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She just nodded once, the way she had that first night when he asked her to dinner. Yes. Later, as snow fell again outside the showroom windows and their laughter echoed through the empty space they now shared, Jessa leaned against him, her hand resting on his chest. "You really had no idea what you were getting into," she said. He kissed her temple. "I sat down in a waiting room and found the rest of my life." And this time she believed it. Every single word. Jessa stood barefoot on the cool concrete floor of what was now officially Parker Langston Studio, her reflection dimly visible in the glass as the sun began to rise behind the city skyline. The soft hum of the espresso machine filled the stillness. A new daily ritual she'd grown to love, her mornings no longer rushed but intentional, wrapped in the quiet calm of a life that finally fit. Preston emerged from the spiral staircase, his shirt half-buttoned, hair still damp from the shower. He paused when he saw her, a slow smile pulling across his face, not performative, not polished, just real. "You're up early," he said, walking over to kiss her temple. "I couldn't sleep. My brain was designing cabinetry in my dreams again. We might need to talk about boundaries between you and your subconscious." She handed him a cup of coffee, black, exactly how he liked it. "I've accepted that I'm incapable of turning it off." Preston sipped and leaned against the island. "You know, I used to think happiness would feel like fireworks. Something thunderous. But this waking up with you, drinking coffee in our studio, this is better." Jessa tilted her head. "You're getting sentimental. I'm getting honest." The morning passed in a steady rhythm. She sketched shelving ideas for a new client while Preston fielded a call from one of his development partners in Tokyo. They didn't interrupt each other. They didn't hover. They worked in tandem, like a dance they hadn't choreographed but somehow knew instinctively. Later that afternoon, they headed to the site of a community center renovation Jessa had taken on as a passion project. It wasn't lucrative, but it mattered. The building was tucked in a quiet district of the city, and the kids who played outside stopped what they were doing when Jessa stepped out of the car. One of them ran over and hugged her waist without hesitation. "You came back," the little boy said. "I told you I would." Preston watched from a few steps behind, his expression unreadable. When Jessa walked over to him, he spoke quietly. "You never told me this was why you worked so hard." She glanced toward the building. "It's not about the money. It never was. It's what the money allows me to do." He nodded slowly. "What would you need to expand this? To do more places like it?" "Funding. And time. And a team I trust. I'll fund it. Quietly. Anonymously." She touched his arm. "You don't have to. I want to." They walked through the building together, her pointing out where the new art room would go, where the library would be expanded, how the basement could be transformed into a music studio. He didn't interrupt, just listened, taking mental notes like he was the student and she was the professor. That evening, they returned to the studio and found a package waiting at the front door. Jessa carried it inside and opened it on the kitchen island. Inside was a vintage drafting compass, the kind with delicate brass arms and a velvet-lined case. A note was tucked inside. "To the woman who taught me how to draw a new kind of life." She turned to him, her voice unsteady. "You didn't have to give me anything. It's not a gift," he said, stepping closer. "It's a reminder that I see you." She kissed him then, slow and deliberate, her hand resting over his heart. That weekend, they hosted a dinner for their closest friends and colleagues inside the new showroom space. It was an intimate affair, no press, no photographers, just good food, music, and the people who had stood by them through the storm of growth and change. Jessa wore a midnight blue dress with a low back, and Preston couldn't take his eyes off her the entire night. During dessert, he tapped his glass for attention. The room quieted. "I'm not great with speeches," he began, "but I've learned that the most important things in life are rarely planned. I didn't plan to meet Jessa in a waiting room. I didn't plan to fall in love with a woman who challenges me at every turn. And I definitely didn't plan on asking her to marry me in front of all of you. The room gasped. Jessa's fork fell to her plate. He turned to her, pulling a slim ring box from his pocket. But here we are. I don't want more years of waiting. I want mornings. I want blueprints and late nights and you stealing the covers and telling me I'm wrong about grout colors. I want you. All of it. Will you marry me? Jessa stood slowly, her eyes wide. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that cracked open something deep and permanent. Yes. The applause was deafening, but she only heard the sound of his breath as he pulled her into his arms and kissed her like the world had just agreed to stand still long enough for them to live in it fully. 6 months later, they were married in the garden behind the new community center they had helped restore. It was a small ceremony, white lanterns strung between trees, children from the neighborhood tossing flower petals, and a string quartet playing under a trellis wrapped in ivy. Jessa wore a cream silk gown that caught the light like water, and Preston stood at the end of the aisle in a tailored navy suit, his hands steady for once, his heart not racing from nerves, but from certainty. Their vows were handwritten, private, and imperfect just like them. I used to build walls to protect myself, Jessa had said, her voice shaking. But you didn't knock them down. You stood outside, waited, and let me open the door. And I used to think love would complicate everything, Preston had replied. But all it did was simplify the truth. I've never been more sure of anything than I am of you. As they kissed beneath the soft canopy of dusk, the children cheered louder than the quartet could play. There were no drones, no headlines, no curated photos for social media. Just the sound of laughter, the scent of jasmine, and the knowledge that they had chosen each other fully without conditions. Later that night, in the quiet of their shared studio apartment above the showroom, Jessa sat on the floor with her sketchbook open, barefoot in her wedding dress, a glass of champagne beside her. Preston lay on his side, watching her draw. What are you working on now? He asked. The future, she said without looking up. Need a partner? She glanced at him, eyes soft. I already have one. And in that silence, where no words were needed, they knew. Everything they had built, every scar, every twist, every unexpected turn had led them here. Home.